Good day, everybody. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you being part of Two-Way and Two-Way Tonight this evening. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. You can go in the chat. Peace, love, and understanding, always. And if you're here on the platform, you want to get in the conversation, raise your hand. Abbreviated episode tonight. We're just going for 30 minutes. I'm going to tell you what I know and then take some questions. Lots going on. And today, to me, was kind of the break point day. And we kind of talked a little bit about this morning. The morning meeting. Things are very tense now. I'm for America. I don't have a candidate in this race, and I'm doing my best to try to make sure the country comes out of this election as united as we can be, regardless of the outcome. As always, every day, ask you, imagine how you'll handle it if your candidate loses. But things are quite tense. This morning, we talked on the program about the fact that the early vote looks very good for Republicans. Not that they're going to win the early vote, but that the delta is going to be small enough, if it stays on this trajectory, that election day would be anticlimactic, that Democrats are going to have to do better. And they say they will. Dan and I have asked Democrats, say, we're talking to Democrats. They're telling us things don't look good. If you want to dispute that, point to some public data. We're not suppressing anything. We always want to present the full story. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about tension in a moment, but let me just give you a summary of the day. The vice president did not do any public events. She did do 2 interviews, one with NBC, which we'll show you some clip or two from in a moment. No huge news in the clips that they've released so far, but interesting stuff. Who was out there for the vice president today? Former President Barack Obama was in Wisconsin with the running mate, with the Governor Walz, and he spent a lot of his speech engaged in personal attacks on Donald Trump, and not talking about the economy or immigration, but talking about Donald Trump personally, along the lines we've heard the Democrats focus on the last few days. Joe Biden was in New Hampshire. A lot of head scratching about that. And we might have time to play a soundbite from him up in New Hampshire. The Trump campaign today sent out a notice trying to hire people for the last 2 weeks to do field work in New Hampshire for the Trump campaign. Announced today that on Friday, Vice President will go to Texas to give a speech on abortion rights. Why Texas? There's symbolism there, being celebrated in some quarters, being head scratching in others. Why is she not going to a battleground state? Also on Friday, in the same state, I believe, Donald Trump in Austin will tape the Joe Rogan program. I don't know if he's doing all 3 hours or not. Bruce Springsteen announced today he'll be campaigning with both Barack Obama, his close friend, and the vice president. The Georgia State Election Board's controversial mandate requiring poll workers to hand count the number of ballots cast will not take effect this year. That's something Republicans had passed. The courts had struck down. The ultimate court in Georgia struck it down today, at least for this election. So there won't be this extremely unusual provision that everybody has to can count. As I said, people are very emotional today. Democrats emotional about the characterization on this platform about the early vote, and a lot of tension in Democratic land because they're behaving as if they're losing. I'm just telling you, that's the view of Democrats too, not just the media, not just Republicans. Trump campaign's behaving like they're winning, and Democrats say that's spin. They're just spinning you. They want you to think, Democrats said today, we want you to think that they're winning. So when they lose, they can claim the election was stolen. Maybe, but they do think they're winning, and they're not the only ones who think they're winning. Not that the election's a foregone conclusion, but if it were today, Trump would win, and that the early vote is very ominous so far for the Democrats, okay? So a couple of pieces came out today online that are being much discussed in my world. The first, if we could put this up, please, a headline from Politico. Jonathan Martin, their columnist, wrote a column that basically says people don't understand what Kamala Harris is doing. He analyzes in great detail the event she did yesterday with Liz Cheney, and basically says, if you read between the lines, and I know Jonathan Martin a little bit, if you read between the lines, he's basically saying Democrats are in a panic because they don't understand her message, and that campaigning with Liz Cheney on democracy is not going to win the undecided voters. Okay. Second is a column or an article in The Atlantic by Jeffrey Goldberg, who runs The Atlantic. And that story, again, I don't know if we have that headline. If we do, please put it up. That story has, as The Atlantic has done in the past, that story has headlines or blind quotes, rather, from people alleging Donald Trump said things that are quite provocative, racially charged, disrespectful of the military. The Atlantic has run stories like this before. The Trump campaign says these quotes are made up. The stories are made up. They came back both in the story and elsewhere. I don't want to get into the details of the Atlantic story here. I haven't time to do any of the reporting myself. It didn't run that long ago. But it's the kind of story that Republicans look at and get furious at, including the Trump campaign. And it's the kind of story that Democrats believe will finally open the eyes of those Americans still inclined to vote for Donald Trump, because they'll argue that it reveals who he really is. These last 2 weeks are going to be filled with things like this. And I can tell you, without going into detail, that I've been pitched a story about Donald Trump now for about a week that, if true, would end his campaign. And there's all sorts of things like that flying around. I'm not the only one who's been pitched it. But we have to recognize how high the stakes are, how high the emotions are. And every day I'll be saying the same thing. Please work in your community, in your family, in your circles. Let's try to tamp this down. The country's been bitterly divided for a long time. Donald Trump's presence on the national stage has exacerbated it. It's really bad right now. And we have to be in a position where we can survive as a nation, regardless of who wins. All right. We'll talk more about that, but let's look at some of Kamala Harris's interview. Hallie Jackson of NBC. Donald Trump has an event next hour in North Carolina. The full interview, or at least a lot of it, I should say, is going to air on NBC in 20 minutes. So you can, when we log off, you can go watch it. But let's look at the first soundbite, which is Hallie Jackson talking about to Kamala Harris about a female president. Roll that, please.
Something that you said when you were running for president the last time around, back in 2019. At the time, you said that the elephant in the room was whether the country was ready for a woman and a woman of color to be president. So let me ask you, as you sit here today, do you think the country is ready now for a woman and a woman of color to be president?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I am saying that in terms of every walk of life of our country. You know, I think part of what is important in this election is really not only turning the page, but closing the page and the chapter on an era that suggests that Americans are divided. What I know from personal experience, from lived experience, and from my travels even most recently, the vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. And what the American people want in their president is a president for all Americans, which is the type and kind of president I pledge to be. This is my life's work. As you know, I started as a prosecutor. I never asked a victim of crime, a witness to crime, are you a Republican or Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them is, are you okay? And that's what the American people want to know, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender or their age. They want to know that they have a president who sees them and understands their needs and focuses on their needs, understanding we all deserve to have a...
Okay, next clip. This is Kamala Harris talking about whether she's prepared to deal with it if Donald Trump challenges the election results. Roll that, please.
Election. The former president came out on election night and declared victory before all the votes were counted. What is your plan if he does that again in 2 weeks?
Well, let me say this. We've got 2 weeks to go. And I'm very much grounded in the present in terms of the task at hand. And we will deal with election night and the days after as they come. And we have the resources and the expertise and the focus on that as well.
So you have teams ready to go? Is that what you're saying? Are you thinking about that as a possibility?
Of course. This is a person, Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people, who incited a violent mob to attack the United States Capitol, and 140 law enforcement officers were attacked. Some were killed. This is a serious matter. The American people are, at this point, 2 weeks out, being presented with a very, very serious decision about what will be the future of our country.
A
right,
battleground trio today. Pennsylvania, Michigan.
Hold on, pause that one. One or two more clips. If you have it, number 3, the clip about ICE, if we have that one.
Back in 2019, you stopped short of calling to abolish ICE, as some Democrats were doing at the time, but you also said...
I'd never called for
correct,
abolishing
you
ICE.
stopped short of that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You said
Yeah.
we should critically re-examine it, and you considered starting from scratch. Would you consider, if you're president, starting from scratch with ICE?
Let me tell you what the Customs and Border Patrol agents need, what the immigration system needs. It needs to be fixed. And it needs to be fixed in a number of ways.
All right. One more if we have it. I'll ask my colleagues if we have it. There's one more about government-funded surgeries. Do we have that one? All right.
Don't know yet.
All right. You'll let me know if we do. I'm eager to hear that one. That's a Hallie Jackson following up on one of the many questions dodged in the Brett Baer interview. All right. Going to open it up to your questions. There's lots of topics we could discuss. There's a Joe Biden soundbite I won't play. Actually, let's play it. It's interesting. This is Joe Biden in campaigning in New Hampshire 2 weeks before Election Day. Let's play that, please.
He is talking about doing away with the entire Department of Education. He's talking, he means it. This is not a joke. This is a guy who also wants to replace every civil servant, every single one. Thinks he has a right under the Supreme Court ruling on immunity to be able, if need be, if it was the case, to actually physically eliminate, shoot, kill someone who he believes to be a threat to him. I mean, so I know this sounds bizarre. It sounds like if I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up. Politically lock him up.
All right. Again, things are getting tense out there. Last soundbite. This is from the Hallie Jackson interview. And again, the reason these are sort of rolling in late here is because they just got posted just a little while ago. But let's go ahead and play the last soundbite from the Hallie Jackson NBC interview with Kamala Harris on question of sex change operations.
But I don't know that I heard a clear answer from you on the issue of gender-affirming care. It sounds like what you're saying is this should be something between trans Americans and their doctors. It feels like that's a long way from "we see you and we love you," which was your message to trans Americans in May. What do you want the LGBTQ plus community to know as they're looking for a full-throated backing from you for trans Americans?
I believe that all people should be treated with dignity and respect. Period. And should not be vilified for who they are. And should not be bullied for who they are. And that is a true statement for me my entire career. And that has not changed.
All right. Some will say still no answer. All right. Lauren Leader and I are now, thank you for joining, Lauren, are now here to take your questions. So, as always, peace, love, and understanding here. Tell us who you are, or rather where you are, who you're supporting and for president, and what's on your mind. We'll start with Mark Altman. Mark, welcome in. Thanks for joining again. Tell us where you are, who you're supporting, what's on your mind.
Yeah, I'm supporting Trump. I'm from New York, Long Island, New York. And I love your show, and I really like what you're doing. I think it's the best political show out there, and I'm really enjoying it. What I want to know is the information that you're getting ahead of time, you know, that in the pre-voting, is that indicative of one party winning over the other, or would you know more by the end of the week, like by Friday, how things are going?
Great question, Mark. We'll know more
Good
every
question.
day.
And Mark and I have been bickering
Yeah.
about this
Yeah.
all day.
We'll know more every day. Let's have Michael or a Democratic strategist. Michael, you weigh in on where you think the early vote stands. What do we know about it? Why are at least some Democrats concerned about where it stands now?
Well, first of all, I would say the early vote in 2020, just going back 4 years ago, based just to give you some context and how it affected us on the Biden campaign in real time, it did give us an idea of how much runway room was left for election day. That meant that we would know on election day or going into election day, by the number of people who have early voted in each state, how many votes we needed on election day. And we knew that Donald Trump had to hit a certain number in order to catch up to our advantage going into election day. And we were pretty confident most of October because we didn't think he was going to be able. Our data showed that the runway that we had left and the numbers that he needed to hit on election day gave us optimism that he would not be able to hit numbers specifically in places like Pennsylvania and Arizona. And we had a little bit of reason to be confident because, as you saw, Fox News did call Arizona pretty confidently that night, very early on. So we knew he wouldn't hit his mark there, and we knew he wouldn't hit his mark in Pennsylvania, only that was decided a couple of days later. But there was a feeling of calm and confidence surrounding our campaign at the time, based on what we saw in the early vote and what we had going into election day versus what he had and what he had left. It also dictated some of our travel. For example, we cut back on travel to certain states, and we amped up travel to other states where we saw early voting lagging behind. We did, however, I would say this, because our campaign at the time had so much money, we did go to Texas. I think the VP went to Texas, Jill Biden went to Texas. We would go to Florida and North Carolina to kind of force them to spend their money, even though we knew by the numbers we were never going to get above 46.7%. So there are things that you can foreshadow that will dictate and guide strategy, but it's not determinative, and it certainly isn't predictive of what's going to happen. I'm more concerned, and Mark mentioned this briefly, about the voter registration numbers in places like Pennsylvania that closed yesterday, and less optimistic than the last time I was on the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lauren, do you want to comment on early?
Yeah, just look, Mark and I have been like bickering about this all day because he and I have slightly different views on it. And, look, there are definitely there has been high Republican turnout in the early vote in some very important places, including Florida and Nevada. So, here's the deal. When the secretaries of state report the early vote numbers, they can't tell you who people voted for. So nobody can tell you who is winning where. They can report and do report on the on the political registration of those folks. So they'll say this number of registered Republicans, this number of registered Democrats. Okay, fine. So on the surface, you could say, okay, more Republicans voted in Nevada. Trump is definitely way, way ahead in Nevada. Okay. And this is where Mark and I disagree. And actually, I called out a piece in Newsweek today because Newsweek actually reported it as Trump winning in X. And that's not fair because you don't know the answer to that. And the reason is because right now, people are voting all over the place in terms of their party ID. Now, I don't expect Kamala to win Florida. It doesn't look great for her in Nevada. I think I agree with Mark on that. But I think in this cycle, when you had, like in Florida, 150,000 registered Republicans who voted for Nikki Haley, I have a hard time believing that all those people are going to immediately, just because they're registered Republicans, vote for Trump. So we don't really know. But to Michael LaRosa's point, the campaigns watch it closely, and they have reason to worry. Democrats are worried because usually early vote, super high Democratic early vote turnout does favor Democrats. It's definitely not looking that great. Georgia's looking really good for Democrats right now. We could debate North Carolina. I think the Democrats are feeling good about Georgia, given those numbers. But anyway, so that's what our debate is. It's like, how confidently can you predict anything? this year, which I think is probably a bit of an outside year.
Okay, Mark, thank you. Appreciate it.
he is
Kim,
muted.
come on in. Tell us where you are, who you're supporting for president, and what's on your mind, please. For those who don't know. Welcome back.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kim. I'm from North Carolina, and I voted for Trump in 16, Biden in 20. I was undecided, but I think I'm going to lean towards Kamala. And honestly, my question is for Lauren. So, what made me tilt my vote? And Mark, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but I listened to your interview with Tucker Carlson, and you talked about like if Donald Trump wins, that there will be a mental health crisis, I think is the way you worded it. So I was wondering, Lauren, do you agree with Mark that like if Donald Trump wins, do you think that a lot of people will be really depressed and unhappy with the vote? Like, Mark, I don't know if I don't really take you as a person like being very dramatic at all. Like, I feel like you're a pretty straight shooter. So that interview like scared me after I listened to that because I thought, wow. I mean, honestly, if Trump wins, I trust the American people. I don't really have a big stake emotionally either way, but I'm going to vote for the underdog just because I'm going to. But anyway, Lauren, what do you think if Donald Trump wins? What do you think?
I think that's a really great question. And I've been thinking about it a lot, actually. I mean, a couple things. One is that I was very distraught in 2016. I'm not going to lie. I cried. I sat in my office. My entire team was in tears. People are very upset, and it was a shock to the system. But it's not just like some snowflakey thing. Like there are communities in this country who have whether you agree with them or not, they have very real fears about what a second Trump administration would need from them. Married gay couples are very worried that if there is any more Supreme Court appointments, and even if there's not, that there could be, a rollback of gay marriage, which several justices spoke to in the Dobbs decision. There is real concern among many women that a Republican administration and Congress would then go after things like birth control and IVF, which they've said they won't do, but their policies don't seem to line up with that. And, for immigrant communities, folks who have undocumented family members, there's very real fear that families will be torn apart because that is what he has said he's going to do. So I think, we can sort of mock people's emotional reaction, but I actually think that there are some very real fears that many Americans have and a worry that we're becoming a nation. And by the way, I think those are real on both sides. There are definitely Trump people. I mean, I've been watching the comments. There's people are very worked up in the chat today. I would just like to remind everybody to peace, love, and understanding, to quote Mark. But, there's lots of Republicans who think that, the country's over if another Democrat wins. People take this very personally. But so I don't know if I would call it a mental health crisis, but I do think there's very real and scary stuff that, if you're for many of these groups that feel that they could be targeted, that's really scary.
Yeah. All right.
But
Michael,
I appreciate
what do
your
you think?
thoughtfulness. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, love
what
to
do
hear
you
from
think?
you.
I think the alarmism has been a problem on both sides that got us to this point. I mean, and I say this as a Democrat, but I think there are reasons to be distressed by Trump's rhetoric for sure. But if you look at how he governed, the judges he appointed were no different than the judges he promised or the judges that George W. Bush appointed. The tax policy, the commitment to open up Anwar, all of it was very par for the course Republican policy, frankly. And aside from maybe his immigration executive orders, all of which can be overturned, I try to be pragmatic about the reality of his leeway and his limitations. And he's very limited into how much he can the country will not, democracy will not end. And I think it's an unfortunate way that it was framed by my party. And I wish it hadn't, they hadn't gone that way because they better have an answer for now. If he is elected, they have to have an answer for democracy. And the truth is it's not going anywhere.
Kim, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming back. All right. Elise, you're unmuted. Go ahead. Tell us where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind, please.
Hi, Elise, from Nevada. I'm in Northern Nevada. I just wanted to say first, I really appreciate your direct kind of assessment, Mark, of like how everybody is feeling across the country. I feel like you're a super straight shooter.
Stressed.
I like that. I also appreciate the constant like we're gonna get through this, like whatever happens. Like I think that's something more people need to be saying. Like the only way that we do not fall apart as a country is if we believe we're not going to fall apart as a country, regardless of what happens. So I've really appreciated that. I just wanted to share my perspective as a Nevada voter in a battleground state. I was so happy to hear the call out to John Ralston this morning, Mark. So thanks for doing that.
He's very famous back east.
Yeah, he's awesome. We love John Ralston here.
At least just tell us who you're supporting, if you don't mind.
Sorry, Kamala Harris.
Okay.
I'm voting against Trump. She's not my favorite, but I'm excited to vote for a woman for president.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, as a I'm a registered nonpartisan voter in Nevada. In the last 2 weeks, I have been hit so hard from not either campaign telling me to get out to vote, but the ballot initiatives. We have a voter ID ballot initiative and then a ranked choice voting ballot initiative.
Yeah.
I would say I am feeling like, as someone who hasn't voted yet but will vote soon, the most pressure to vote from those ballot initiatives, which is just interesting. Like, again, early voting started here on Saturday. I have not had any Kamala people, any Trump people come to my door. Not even like
That's
Jackie
crazy.
Sam Harris people. It's like it's a lot of ballot initiative mail too.
Where do you live? Elise, do you live in Clark County?
No, I'm in Washoe County. I'm in Reno, which I put in the chat is like purple, but like leans blue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's political malpractice that no one's knocking on your door. But yeah, I mean, the ballot initiatives are so interesting, and the RCV stuff, like there's a big movement. I mean, I am a huge RCV fan myself, ranked choice voting. I think, first of all, it's very good for women when they run for office. Because in New York City, it wound up getting us 50% women on the city council, like overnight, which was pretty amazing. So I'm a fan. But yeah, the ballot initiatives, I've been really feeling like that's another piece of the puzzle where I've been wondering if some of the polls and other analyses are undercounting the focus on the ballot initiatives, not just in your state, but like in Arizona, where abortion is also a ballot initiative. So it's going to be fascinating.
So
but thanks for raising that.
Yeah, so we have abortion on this ballot initiative. The very last ballot initiative to be added was the voter ID ballot initiative. And
Right.
I was sure that when that one was added, it was going to mean we would turn out more like Trumpish voters. There was a really interesting poll done that actually found that in Nevada, Trump and Harris were tied, but that question 7 was overwhelmingly like 73% of people supported
Right.
the voter ID, which was interesting,
Yeah. Elise, we're really grateful to you for joining, and we hope you'll come back regularly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Come back.
Michael, thank you also for joining.
Of
Grateful
course.
to you, and always love having you on. Thank you all for joining. Sorry, we're a short episode for those of you who were hoping for an hour. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., we'll be back. And then don't forget, again, on Thursday, 2-hour-long specials. Don't forget, tomorrow, Lauren's show at 5 on Michigan. And then Thursday, 11 to 1 Eastern time, Karl Rove on the Electoral College. And then 6 to 8, a big Pennsylvania poll, a Pennsylvania panel of undecided voters, and a lot of stuff from Pennsylvania. We'll talk about that key state for 2 hours on Thursday night. Thank you for joining. We'll see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow for the morning meeting. Good night.